A stone's throw away from the ever-changing skyline of modern, successful and peaceful Singapore stands the Supreme Court, a proud architectural legacy of the colonial period. But the Grand Lady of Justice has also seen its fair share of turmoil and injustice. And one particular episode that stands out happened 50 years ago. It was the day of the verdict on the Maria Hertogh case. The crowd was poised to strike. And it did, with explosive violence, when the verdict was made known. Like a fire, the anger and violence fanned outwards, with Caucasians being the target. 2 days later, 18 people had lost their lives, and 173 had been injured. A.R. Jumaboy, who was in his early 20s then, remembers that day well.
This call came from some friends of my father in a panic that their brother had been stabbed. He was very fair, looked like a Caucasian. I took my old ramshackle car and drove on to the street, Arab Street, which was in a sorry state, and glasses and windows shattered, shops all shuttered up. I suppose the people were very frightened. My friend's was brother Champak Lal, whose name is still up there on the street. This chap was bleeding, so we went to General Hospital. He's got, I think, a scar somewhere. If you ever get hold of him, I don't know whether he's still around.
The riots were the result of a court battle for custody of a young girl. Maria Hertogh was separated from her Dutch parents during the Japanese occupation. She was raised a Muslim by a Malay couple. Her natural parents claimed custody after the war. Maria was put in a convent during the trial. Press reports of such high-handedness raised temperatures even further. The colonial authorities had failed to appreciate religious sensitivities. It was an extremely costly mistake.
When this verdict was announced, apart from the crowd over there, this place erupted, you know. So one of those passions aroused by religious frenzy, irrationalism. And I think for us, the lesson here, the cardinal lesson, is never to run roughshod over sensitivities, whether they are of race or religion, in our multiracial society.
Alexandria Road. Many of us think of it as that stretch of road where you can go shop for that dream car. What we may not know is that it was here, some 45 years ago, that our society was nearly torn apart. This was where the Hock bus rides took place. The scene was charged on 23rd April 1955. The Hock bus workers had gone on strike.
因为迄阵点下，我人鼓励工也是少啦，头家咧，常常就讲你若会使有工做落啊，咁免去鼓励工就好啦。迄阵我人所以才去工会啦，参加这工会啦，叫工会讲，莫要求去淡薄加鼓励工啊，迄阵点下佫做诶点佫长啦，毋是讲真短，所以头家袂批准咯。 每种工会代表几哪个啦，开会啦，就讲采取行动讲去罢工啦。
Fong Swee Swan, known for his pro-communist leanings, was then the General Secretary of the Singapore Bus Workers Union. To put even more pressure on the government, he mobilized Chinese school students to support the strikers. It was a tense standoff, and finally, on 12th May, after an attack on a bus, the police decided to take action.
有了啊，用莫讲就对，迄石头会飞啦，敢若落雨天安尼款。后生的人会痛啦，你老的人敢若有40外岁、50岁的人啊，迄石头安尼飞，敢若迄手榴，迄什么弹就对，炸弹安尼款，因飞起来安尼款，迄石头一粒一粒安尼飞起来。
The situation quickly got out of hand. Many were seriously injured, and several people, policemen and a student, lost their lives. The government under David Marshall finally backed down. The workers saw it as a victory, but little did they understand that they were pawns in a political struggle. The lesson from the Hockley bus riot is clear. Poverty and alienation provide fertile ground for unrest. The Chinese high school, one of the best in Singapore, but it was also the nerve center for cultural chauvinism. Sun Lo Bun, a former student activist in the 50s, remembers.
华校生呢，看的报纸是华文报，书是华文书。那么当时的华文报，中国大陆出的书是宣扬共产思想。当时的华校生就容易被牵入进政治活动，也容易受马共分子的影响，甚至加入他们，成为他们的支持者。
Chinese middle school students were very much involved in politics for much of the 50s. They took on the authorities time and again, and often the rallying cry was Chinese culture and language. In 1961, a new policy aimed at standardizing education in Singapore was introduced. It required Chinese middle school students to sit for examinations prepared by the Ministry of Education. Believing pro-communist rhetoric that the new system would destroy Chinese education in Singapore, student activists boycotted the exams.
甚至有的是因为本身都不大喜欢读书没有很好准备报考不是更光荣了我推测是有的，当然我们也得承认，其中有一部分是被盲目牵动的，而都不懂得真正这个报考的真正目的。他们认为，就是华文教育当时所得到的待遇是不平等，当时的政府就是要迫害跟消灭华文教育，他们就是这样简单的。
The government was able to foil the boycott by appealing to parents. Fortunately for our young today, the student activism of the 50s and 60s is just another chapter in local history. But it will be a mistake for us to think that we no longer need to guard against cultural and racial chauvinism. Besides the National Stadium, many of us know that City Hall is the other staging area for our National Day parades. But how many of us remember that this place also saw the start of a procession that led to the worst racial riot in our history? It began peacefully enough with a rally to kick off celebrations for the marking of Prophet Muhammad's birthday. But as the participants made their way towards Kalang, something went terribly wrong. Inche Othman Wok, who was leading a contingent on that fateful day, recalls.
We were walking along this road when we heard some commotion happening in front. I saw people were chasing each other, and not far near me there was a Chinese old man who was assaulted by some young Malays. I led the boys to those steps and asked them to sit down just in front of the door. I told them to throw away the flags and the buntings and to sit down there. Then I went into the building. Fortunately, there was a telephone still in working order. So I phoned the Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, and told him what had happened.
But by then, the fighting had already started, with Malays and Chinese attacking each other. The violence had quickly spread from Kalang to Geylang, and then to other parts of the island. And one person who had a close shave was Haji Aliman, who was driving home from work that day.
Bila sampai ke Victoria Street, saya nampak beberapa orang pemuda Cina dengan batang cangkul, dengan parang, dengan apa, mencari orang Melayu di dalam bas atau dalam teksi. Ya? Jauh lagi saya tukar program kereta saya, radio sekali kereta saya dari program Melayu ke program Mandarin. Tiba-tiba saya dapat itu, inspirasi, saya tukar. Jadi bila saya jalan perlahan-lahan sampai ke pemuda-pemuda itu, mereka tahan saya. Mereka fikir saya orang Cina kerana wajah saya seperti orang Cina. Jadi mereka tanya saya dalam bahasa Hokkien. Oleh kerana saya tidak begitu fasih dalam bahasa Hokkien, saya jawab dalam bahasa Cantonese. So mereka tanya saya, "Li ai kitolok." So saya jawab dalam bahasa Cantonese, "Moi fan okay." Then hai pin si, le hai pin si, tinggal di mana? Saya jawab, "Ngohai Jalan Sultan Ci." Dan mereka kata lagi, "I'm move on okay lah, hutom Malayan ta thong yan lah." So saya jawab lagi, "Busong ko na, ko tay lúc chung hai ngo cái朋友, ko tay sik tak ngo,唔使驚啦, kamu fight hui lah." So saya masuk gear kereta saya, cepat-cepat larilah. Kalau tidak kena pukul mati kat situ.
Despite a curfew, violence continued across the island. In all, 23 people lost their lives, with more than 450 injured. Madam C still remembers the scenes that played outside her shuttered windows.
他们红颜哭的哈，就轰，很激动的哈，就跑一大堆人出来了，把烂刀啦、沙啦、棍啦、汽水瓶啦，不止打棍啦、打脚踢了哈。 跟把烂刀整个头给他杀过去了，还好能偷看，有些手啊脚啊就这样砍啊，当场就砍啊，见到就砍啊。
Suspicion and fear hung heavily in the air. A lot of hard work had to be put in to ease the tension after the riots.
In the kampongs, the Chinese and Malay families have been living side by side as neighbors for decades, protected each other during the riots. Well, this was very good, but still, I think at that time there was still a little bit of fear between the two communities.
A few weeks before the racial riots, Malaysian politicians had told the Malay community here that they were denied their rights and privileges.
Kami orang-orang Melayu di Singapura, we Malays in Singapore have for a very long time been suppressed and oppressed. No force in this world can trample us down. Not one Lee Kuan Yew, 1,000 Lee Kuan Yew, we finished them all.
The speeches stirred up emotions, and it didn't take much to provoke a riot, which was exactly what happened.
The lessons that we learned was that we have to build up social cohesion, which is very important. And we have to maintain our racial harmony among our multiracial population. And we should not allow others to play on these very sensitive issues of race and religion.
The year was 1965, the height of Indonesia's confrontation. And it was here, at McDonald House along Orchard Road, that a bomb exploded, one that was placed by Indonesian saboteurs. It was a powerful explosion, ripping the bank and sending lethal shards of glass flying in all directions. Three people were killed, scores others injured. It was an experience many would never forget. Like Mr. Yo Swan Kim, who happened to be walking outside the building during those fateful seconds.
有一个医生从楼上下来，他看到我，他就跟我止血。那么救护车把我送到中央医院去，医生发现我的身上是一块大的玻璃插在我的内肝脏，我身上所有的地方都是疤痕，被炸的疤痕。那么我的眼睛右眼也逝去了，被爆炸出来逝去了。
Before the bomb at McDonald House, there had already been 29 other explosions. In their security sweeps across the island, the police had uncovered much material for the making of explosives. They were also on the lookout for Indonesian infiltrators and had in fact arrested quite a few. But of course, many also got away. Vernon Palmer, a former broadcaster, remembers one particular day when he was on duty at the TV station.
I was told that the police had arrived and they wanted to see me. They were looking out for a suspicious character. However, they soon burst into the room and with their Sten guns. I thought they were the Indonesian invaders, so I nearly put my hand up, to surrender to them. But they came in and they said, "We want to pick up," meaning we want to arrest the man who's singing on television now. So that the monitor was on, and I said, "Which man do you want?" And the chap singing, "Layang, layang, da dee da dee da dee," became my favorite song after that. And they wanted to pick up that man because he was the ringleader of the saboteurs. And so I said, "I'm sorry, you've come a bit late, because this program has been recorded, and he's well away." They didn't believe me, so I took them down to the studio and showed them the empty studio. And a thought occurred to us all at the time. If this guy had entered the studio legitimately as an artist, he could very well have planted a booby trap bomb in the building. So we had to make a thorough search of the building to look for any brown paper parcel or any paper parcel that was left around. But we never did find any, but we were always worried that there might have been a parcel left behind.
These saboteurs had been sent by Indonesian President Sukarno, who had declared confrontation against the Federation of Malaysia, which Singapore belonged to at the time. One of the reasons for doing so was that Sukarno's hold on power was weakening. He needed to distract Indonesians from domestic problems and to get them to rally around him. Confrontation was his solution. It was a time where one could never be sure where the danger lurked. To minimize that, the Singapore Vigilante Corps was mobilized.
Orang tak tahu. Dia datang kita dalam guard, security guard pun tak tahu dia siapa. Macam orang jalan jual plastik, t-shirt jalan. Tapi dia dalam bikin kerja pula ni. Pada saya lah, tak ada rasa takut lah. Pasal kita punya our force all equipment all semua bagus. Apa takut dia suruh jaga mas naik dekat itu tank, sekarang sudah tak ada. Itu gas jeep tanker up. Saya jaga naik atas sampai sama rebel. Tapi rebel dulu Max 5 leceh lah.
Although it happened a long time ago, Haji Jafar believes there are lessons to be learned.
Perkara ini mungkin mereka ambil kesempatan sebab government Singapura sudah berjaga begitu betul. Jadi sudahlah, government ada, serahkan kepada government. Tak macam kita rakyat semua, kita bertanggungjawab bersama-sama.
So do we, especially the young, understand that we must continue to hold together? Are we aware that the peace we've worked so hard to achieve can still be upset? In 1998, Malaysia was reeling from the severe Asian economic crisis. In August, the Malaysian Prime Minister criticized Singapore over various issues, drawing shouts of potong from the crowd, a reference to cutting water supply to Singapore. Malaysian leaders have long known that cutting water is tantamount to declaring hostilities.
Pegawai kita disuruh keluar daripada Singapura. Sedangkan kita membekal air kepada mereka.
In that same year, Singapore's relations with Indonesia were also unsettled. The former president, B.J. Habibie, made it known that he believed that Singapore had not done enough to assist Indonesia, referring to us as a tiny red dot. He also remarked, inaccurately, about discrimination of Malay Singaporeans in the SAF. One could only guess at his intentions. Indonesia at that time was also hard hit by the economic crisis, and Mr. Habibie was anxious to stamp his dominance, something which he failed to do.
No, there might be a Sukarno in the next 10 years. I mean, if the present president, Abdul Rahman, should go down, you never know who might be the next one.
On the surface, I should say there's nothing much to worry about. But underneath it, it just needs someone to stir up the communities and bring out these sensitive issues of race and religion. It may happen again. We must not let anyone inside Singapore or outside Singapore to stir up these issues again. And we must always be vigilant against the people because we are vulnerable.
Do we want to repeat the experience? Certainly not. Do you think we worked all these years to build Islam to let it be destroyed by somebody? No, of course not.
We've enjoyed peace for the past 3 decades. The question is, can we continue to keep the peace as our society and the world around us changes? What can we learn from the milestones of our history? And do we have what it takes to hold together as a people?